we can probably go ahead and get started. So we're thrilled to have a conversation today about moving toward a diverse and inclusive global cancer research workforce. I want to start by thanking all of our panelists for contributing to what I'm sure will be a rich conversation today, as well as all of the attendees who've joined. We're going to take advantage of the chat and an interactive tool called Mentimeter to hopefully have a really engaging conversation. I want to thank London Global Cancer Week for inviting us to have this conversation. This is an area that we've been thinking about fairly intensively at the NCI Center for Global Health, as I'll try to explain. And we hope that a lot of our thinking can continue to be informed by conversations with our community, as we hope will occur over the next couple of hours. Next slide, please. Some of you will be aware that we have a new NCI Center for Global Health strategic plan that we've really been working on over the last year and a half or so and published earlier this year. This is available publicly on our website. For those of you, Ned Sharpless and I wrote a perspective in JAMA a couple of months ago outlining many of the main themes in our strategic plan. For those of you who may be interested and haven't had a chance to review this, we'd love for you to read it and let us know your thoughts. In this, we really sought to take stock of where global health at the NCI is and where some of the needs and opportunities are going forward. We tried to refresh our mission, vision, and really oriented our entire strategic plan around the core values of impact, equity, and collaboration. So these are really the animating values that undergird everything that we intend to do in coming years. All of them are salient, I think, to today's conversation focused on global cancer research training. However, perhaps the value of equity is most salient for a conversation focused on a more diverse and inclusive global cancer research workforce. And I just wanted to briefly speak to our attempt to try to articulate what equity meant to us in terms of our activities going forward. I won't presume to say that this is a all-encompassing definition of equity, nor one that is broadly adopted across the NCI, NIH, or US government, but we did think it was important to try to state what equity meant to us as a core value for our activities. And so we said that the core value of equity reflects a belief that all people should benefit from cancer research and that studying cancer anywhere should benefit people everywhere. It also reflects our intent to promote NCI engagement in global cancer research as a peer and partner, and to listen and learn from colleagues and collaborators around the world. We believe such an approach is necessary to realize scientific opportunities afforded by global cancer research and to address historical inequities in the way global health research has often been conducted. Next slide, please. So our work, again, animated by these values that I spoke to on the previous slide, is really focused in 4 primary goal areas: research, research training, dissemination, partnerships. And for us at the Center for Global Health, our primary work is focused on work in low and middle income countries where we think there's much unmet need and also scientific opportunities that are relatively underrepresented in the NCI portfolio currently. And that's something we're working very hard to address. With respect to research training, which is the focus of today's conversation, we hope to support cancer research training that enables equitable, impactful global scientific collaboration. We have a number of strategic priorities beneath this general goal area of research training. And Dr. Sivaram will speak to a number of programs and initiatives that really start to touch on several of these strategic priorities. I won't, just in the interest of time, I won't read through all of them, but all of the priorities shown here are areas that we already have active programs in or are developing, I think, a lot of ideas. And again, we hope that all of that will be informed by conversations like the one that we hope to have over the next couple of hours. Next slide, please. Our work at the NCI Center for Global Health is, of course, occurring in a broader context. So as I mentioned, we published our NCI Center for Global Health strategic plan earlier this year. The NCI also launched an equity and inclusion program last year, following from much of the social justice and racial equity movement that followed in the summer of 2020 following George Floyd's murder. So the Equity and Inclusion Program is really an unprecedented institute-wide effort to deal with a lot of the existing inequities that have been historically quite difficult to make progress around, despite, I think, a lot of good intentions. This is very closely related to the NIH Unite initiative, which many of you will be familiar with. Our work is occurring kind of at an NCI level in close coordination with the NIH Unite initiative. I have had the privilege of participating in this program and co-chairing the working group that is focused on making the internal culture at the NCI more inclusive and equitable. And this is, I've shown just a couple of data points that we presented at our joint board meeting in March of this year, just illustrating the ways in which these inequities currently are playing out, both with respect to the NCI extramural and intramural programs, where in both, there's really a marked lack of representation of particular groups in relation to the US general population. And again, now there's an institute-wide comprehensive systematic effort that really involves the entire NCI at all levels of leadership to try to address this. And I think we've made a lot of progress and have some good momentum a year into this effort, and with a lot of exciting things still to come. Next slide, please. And the NCI effort, of course, is in the larger context as well. And this is just more data from the larger ecosystem in which we all kind of live and exist and work. At left is shown data from the recent ASCO meeting, where these authors had compiled ACGME data across all subspecialty oncology disciplines: pediatric oncology, medical oncology, radiation oncology, surgical oncology. Again, similar to the NCI specific data that I showed you on the last slide, demonstrating a real lack of representation for particular groups in reference to the US general population. And that was pretty consistent between 2015 and 2020 without significant change, which was the period of time that these authors analyzed for this paper. At right is data from the biomedical research workforce more generally. So now this is not cancer specific data. And what you can see there is that there's not equal representation in relation to the US general population. So whites tend to be overrepresented in comparison to national proportion. Black and Hispanic and indigenous groups tend to be underrepresented in comparison to national proportion. And this skew gets worse at later career stages. So it's worse at the faculty level as compared with the graduate student level. And this is despite, as shown at the bottom right of the slide, an increased proportion of biomedical research PhDs awarded to Hispanic and Black graduates over time in recent years. So it really isn't a pipeline issue, but rather structural issues in the way individuals are recruited, retained, promoted in science. And again, certainly at the NCI, like many of your institutions, this is something that we're thinking about, I think, with a depth and breadth that has not occurred previously, and that's certainly welcome. Next slide, please. So in thinking about this conversation, I'm often inspired by Nelson Mandela as someone who spent my entire academic life living and working in sub-Saharan Africa before coming to the NCI last year. This quote, I think, is particularly relevant for today's conversation, where Mandela says that education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And we're certainly inspired by that as we think about our global cancer research training portfolio at the NCI, and also the conversation we hope to have today. Next slide, please. And in addition to being inspired by Mandela, I personally am also inspired by the remarkable group of young global cancer investigators that I had the fortune of working with while I lived and worked in Malawi. I think this is a remarkably diverse group. It looks quite different than the data that I showed you earlier with respect to the NCI supported investigators, with respect to the biomedical research workforce. Many of these individuals have gone on to assume faculty positions at various US and African institutions, often helping to diversify their department or division in which they sit, in many instances being the only person of color. And I often think if we could just find ways to invest in such young people and support them without forcing them to accommodate to the world as it is in order to be successful, that we would get the world as it should be. Next slide, please. I want to remind everyone that the 10th annual symposium on global cancer research is coming up in March. I hope all of you will consider attending. The call for abstracts is currently open, as well as nominations for the Rachel Perline Award. You can find out more at, as shown on this slide. Next year, for the first time, we'll actually be having a dedicated early career investigator day, which is something that we're really excited about. We're working with young investigators through a new D43 program that the NCI has initiated this year to really develop a day focused on them that responds to the things that they think will help move their careers forward. And so if you're an early career investigator, we'd invite you to consider attending that in addition to the symposium at large. Next slide, please. So with that, I'll just remind everyone where you can find out more about our programs at our website, Twitter, and then my email and Twitter handle as well. And look forward to a great discussion over the course of the next couple of hours. Thank you all for attending.
Hi, greetings, everyone. I would like to add my thanks to Dr. Gopal, to the organizers and the panelists, as well as to all of you attending, and welcome you to this session where we will discuss ideas and experiences towards building an inclusive and diverse workforce in global cancer research. We have assembled what we think is a fantastic panel with unique insights and deep commitment to cancer research careers in global settings. And as Dr. Gopal mentioned, before we hear from them, on behalf of our Center for Global Health NCI, I will provide a brief overview of the global cancer research strategy, training strategy, as well as our portfolio. So in the next slide, is some information that I think all of you are familiar with. As we know, low and middle income countries will bear a disproportionate burden of cancer in the coming decades. And even as cancer is recognized as important, cancer research rather is recognized as important to advance cancer knowledge globally. A lack of a trained workforce to conduct this research is a concern. And what we are seeing on this slide is sort of the mismatch between the growth of global cancer research versus the investment in cancer training. In the United States, for instance, there's a lack of consistent support for global cancer research training, and preliminary data from a survey that the NCI and ASCO conducted of NCI designated US cancer centers suggests that of the 67 responding cancer centers, only 5 have a global training program for more than 2 days. And, you know, as we see in the second bullet, there is also a great demand for global oncology research and training. And a recent commission at ASCO has recognized the value of this training as being central to cancer control efforts globally. And finally, and most importantly to us, was that when we surveyed the large NCI cancer training portfolio, which has over 3,000 training awards that include fellowships and career development, as well as institutional training, we found that only 3% have foreign involvement. So in the next slide, you know, we wanted to highlight our approach towards building an equitable workforce, and aligned with the strategic priorities that Dr. Gopal outlined, we are adopting a 3-pronged approach to global cancer research with a particular focus of training and capacity building in low and middle income countries. You know, the first, as you see on the left, is increasing global cancer research skills. Second is supporting global cancer research investigators. And the third area is building global cancer research environments. In the next slides, you know, I will sort of describe each buckets a little bit more in detail. If you can go back one slide, I just wanted to highlight also the 2 websites that are in the bottom of the slide. The NIH Reporter Database is a publicly available database of all NIH grants that is searchable. The World Report Database has information on investments from other funding agencies, including the NIH, and that might be a good resource for collaborations in research and training. And in the next slide, let's begin with looking at what we are doing, some of our activities in improving global cancer research skills. And our support in this area is through facilitating participation of LMIC investigators in existing cancer curricula and efforts to bridge curricular gaps in cancer research by collaborating with both internal NCI colleagues as well as external partners. For instance, NCI offers a training institute in implementation science, as well as a month-long curriculum, which is currently being revised, but the curriculum, NCI curriculum on cancer prevention that takes place in the summer is very popular amongst scientists from low and middle income countries, and we have supported attendance of participants in these courses. We also have a conference grant mechanism that has helped cancer mentors and senior investigators offer cancer research relevant curricula and research mentorship to global scientists. In the next slide, we show how we support global cancer research investigators. And we do this by increasing mentored career development awards to early career scientists using two programs primarily. These programs are led by the Fogarty International Center, and NCI participates by supporting cancer relevant early career scientists. The first program, the International Research Scholar Development Award, is for US scientists who are interested in a global oncology career. And in the table, in the first table, you will see that we have indicated past and current projects and current investigators that we are supporting. The second program, the Emerging Global Leader Award, is only for LMIC scientists. So only LMIC scientists are eligible to apply to this program. And we show you a list of current and past awardees. The highlighted project is to draw your attention to the principal investigator, Dr. Simone Badal, and we are delighted to have Dr. Badal as part of our panel today. On the next slide, you will see that our investments in the past slides, if you had noticed, it was just in the Sub-Saharan Africa region, but our short-term scientist program that we're highlighting on this slide has a more diverse geographic participation. And this program promotes collaborative research between NCI investigators and foreign scientists. And this program also facilitates institutional capacity building as candidates return to their home countries and bring new programs and strengthen research collaborations. In the next slide is our approach to building global cancer research environments. And this involves supporting institutions to develop a diverse workforce with skills to conduct a really relevant cancer research to LMIC settings. And Dr. Gopal mentioned our recently supported D43 program. This is just a name of a mechanism within NCI and NIH that helps us bring together US scientists with scientists from low and middle income countries to share leadership and train leaders in cancer research based on the workforce capacity needs in that collaborating institutions. And highlighted here is one of the 4 projects that we are funding. And again, we are delighted to have leaders from this program on our panel today. And so in the next slide, is basically to highlight why we are here. We are here to discuss certain important concepts in research training. And in our panel today, we have a combination of scientists who are all engaged in cancer research globally, but who are going to reflect either on their early career investigator phase, and others who are going to reflect on their leadership in mentorship in cancer research. So we will follow an outline based on how an individual might initiate, grow, and sustain a career in global cancer research. And so we have identified, as you can see here, 5 steps to a research career, which begins with pursuing research education, followed by pursuing mentored research, and then establishing an independent research career, going on to leading and mentoring programs, and then ultimately sustaining their cancer research careers by collaborating with multidisciplinary teams. Now, we'll admit that this may be a rather US-centric way of looking at a research career path. And we'll acknowledge that this may be different across institutions and countries. However, regardless of where training is taking place, there are some universal factors that we agree that promote success in this path to establishing a research career, promoting diversity of thought, enabling equity in training, and many career nurturing aspects of a mentor-mentee relationships are just some of these factors. And we hope that in today's discussion of these 5 topics, we can constructively unpack some of these factors and clarify needs for research training based on the panel's experience, and most importantly, based on audience participation. And so what you're seeing here in the 3rd bullet is that we will follow an interactive format, and we invite you to post comments, ideas, and questions on the chat feature of Zoom. We also invite you to participate via Mentimeter. Now, Mentimeter is an online platform we will use today to hear your ideas and initiate a discussion. Now, as we begin each topic, and sometimes in between topics, we will post a question on Mentimeter, and we invite you to participate. Dr. Gopal and I will take turns moderating each of the 5 topics, and we will read these questions aloud in order to enable simultaneous translation in Spanish. So let's kick off with the first Mentimeter question. Where on the research career path do you see yourself? Are you pursuing cancer research education? Are you establishing a research career? Perhaps you're leading or mentoring research teams. You may be translating research into practice, or you may be funding research or research training. To answer this question, we ask that you please go to www.menti.com and enter the numeric code that you see displayed on top of this slide, or simply click on the link that we have posted on the chat, and we'll display the QR code periodically. So we see the responses coming up already. And while you're answering this question, we'd like to welcome the panel and request that they introduce themselves. We will begin with 2 experts who are going to offer perspectives from leading and mentoring global cancer research projects, Dr. Li-Fang Hu and Dr. Mamudu Maiga. And then we will have researchers who have extensive global experience reflect on their perspective as early career investigators, Dr. Simone Badal and Dr. Graciela Meza. So over to you, Li-Fang.
We don't hear you. You are.
Sorry. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Li-Fang Hao. I'm a professor of preventive medicine at Northwestern University in Chicago. I'm also directing a Center for Global Oncology under the Institute for Global Health at Northwestern. So my research has been focusing on study risk factors and also biomarkers of cancer. And this has led me to expand my research to global oncology. We have 2 partners, major partners in West Africa. One is Nigeria, and the other country is in Mali. So we focus on HIV associated cancers. Also now we are more interested because of the COVID-19 to study how infectious agent may cause cancer through novel mechanisms, for example, epigenetic mechanisms. We are not only collaborating with our partners in low and middle income countries, we are more focused on learning also from them to also train next generation scientists. And then also in the meantime, we also try to develop capacity, also establish research resources. So for all of us together as a big family to understand how cancer can be prevented and can be put under control. Thank you.
Good. So I
Dr.
can
Maiga?
go next to Yeah, thanks everyone for attending, and thanks to NCI for the invitation. So my name is Mahmoudou Maiga. I work with Lifan Hu at Northwestern University. I am associate professor of preventive medicine, cancer epidemiology, mostly working on infection-associated cancer at NU. So I am associate director for the Center for Global Oncology Advances for Global Health at Northwestern. I have a joint appointment at the Biomedical Engineering Department at McCormick Engineering School, where I am Director of Translational Research in the Center for Innovation in Global Health Technology. We basically make new diagnostic tests for different types of diseases, including cancer diseases. So I have an appointment in Mali at the University of Science, Technique and Technology of Bamako, where I am Professor of Microbiology. So I am originally medical microbiologist who now working on infection-associated cancer primarily. So I also want to mention that I'm from Mali. So I was primary care physician there for 5 years before I moved to the US in 2009 for a PhD and a postdoctoral. I joined NU since 2016. So my position from USCCB date from 2009, so it has been quite a while. So also to mention that I'm MPI with Lifang on the newly NCI funded for the through training that Sula and Satis just mentioned, and it's on infection-associated cancers in Mali. So currently I have 3 PhD students in Mali that I am supervising, 5 early stage investigators that I'm mentoring. One of them has a K grant, and another one just submitted one on breast cancer, and it's a submission. Hopefully that will be funded too. So with Lifang, we should also mention to finish that we build the first center cancer research in Mali, a center that is cancer oriented from all the work we have been doing in Mali since 2016. And we are now lobbying with the Mali government to establish the first national program for cancer control. So there is not one yet. So hopefully that will happen soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mega.
I think it's my time.
Yes, that's your turn, Dr. Badal.
Hi, thank you, Sedat. Hi, everyone. My name is Simone Badal, and I'm a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Mona Campus, which is in Jamaica. And I'm a recipient of the Emerging Global Leader Award, as Sedat previously mentioned. So my focus now is developing novel prostate and breast cancer cell lines. And we recently developed the first Caribbean cell line, which is a prostate cancer cell line. My PhD student at the time was integral to this. He recently graduated with distinction, and he's now pursuing postdoctoral studies at the Fox Chase Cancer Center. So I'm here, the journey, just to give you a brief introduction. I started my journey to developing these cell lines when I was doing my PhD, actually. My PhD focused on screening Jamaican natural products for potential anti-cancer and chemopreventive properties. At the end of the research, we identified several agents that were more potent in killing cancer cells when you compare them to known chemotherapy drugs, and some of them were safer as they didn't harm normal cells. So at the time, my focus was drug development, and in the sequential order, the next step would be to screen these agents in vivo models. We didn't have the facility there, and so I was preparing grant funding to get local support. And while I was doing that, I recognized all the cell lines I used in my research were Caucasian cell lines. And so that spurred a series of questions, inquisitions on my part, to trying to assess or obtain cell lines that were representative of a Caribbean population. And I didn't find any. So that led me to where I am now, trying to bridge this gap, fill this disparity. And I'm honored and pleased to be here. So thank you guys for inviting me.
Thank you, Simone. Dr. Meza.
Gracias. Buenos días. Soy Graciela Mesa Sánchez, médico, profesora de medicina en áreas de investigación y salud pública. Vivo en Iquitos. Iquitos es una ciudad del Perú que está ubicada en la selva amazónica, sí, y para ponerles en contexto, sin facilidades para acceder a ella, solo por avión. Entonces solamente podemos acceder a mi ciudad por avión. Trabajo en la Dirección Regional de Salud de Loreto, que es una especie de Ministerio de Salud para mi región, y en la Facultad de Medicina Humana de la Universidad Nacional de la Amazonía Peruana. En la universidad enseño metodología de la investigación en el pregrado y en el posgrado. Soy parte de equipos de investigación en enfermedades infecciosas desde hace varios años, y desde hace aproximadamente 5 años estoy trabajando en un exitoso programa para mejorar la prevención del cáncer de cuello uterino con la implementación de intervenciones basadas en evidencia científica en establecimientos de salud públicos, que incluye la autotoma, el tamizaje del virus de papiloma humano con pruebas moleculares y el tratamiento con termoablación en el primer nivel de atención. Es decir, en cáncer nos encontramos estableciendo una carrera de investigación en este tema e iniciando un proceso de llevar la investigación a la práctica, Implementation Science. También coordino un programa de formación de jóvenes investigadores en enfermedades infecciosas, financiado por el Instituto Nacional de Salud de Estados Unidos. Es una beca D43, una beca Fogarty de 5 años. Estamos a la mitad del proceso, formando profesionales de salud, médicos, biólogos, enfermeras, que luego continuarán el trabajo en investigación y formación de nuevos investigadores. Además, soy asesora de un grupo de estudiantes de medicina que están asociados desde hace muchos años en la Sociedad Científica de Estudiantes de Medicina de la Amazonía Peruana. Ellos no tienen un financiamiento especial, pero básicamente andan en búsqueda de oportunidades de capacitación para mejorar sus habilidades científicas. Muchas gracias por la invitación.
Gracias. Thank you, Dr. Meza. That was a great start. We look forward to your insights and discussion. So I think we should just go right ahead and begin with the first topic. Our first topic, as you may recall, was pursuing global cancer research education, right? So getting started. So what does it mean? What does it take? So we'll begin again with the first Mentimeter question. And while you answer that, we can begin the panel discussion. So what is needed to recruit diverse trainers to pursue global cancer research career? So what is needed to recruit diverse trainees to pursue global cancer research careers? And while you reflect on that, I'd like to pose a couple of questions to get insights from Simone and Graciela. So starting with you, Graciela, can you talk about how you identified your research topic?
Bueno, sí, en mi país, los temas de investigación que nosotros adoptamos tienen mucho que ver con las prioridades de investigación que han sido establecidas por las propias instituciones peruanas, las universidades, el Ministerio de Salud, porque de esta manera nos garantizan el financiamiento. Por ejemplo, las líneas de investigación que han sido establecidas por el Ministerio de Salud siguen un proceso en el que participan investigadores, epidemiólogos y gestores de salud a nivel de todo el país, con talleres, y entonces son líneas de investigación para solucionar los principales problemas de salud pública de nuestro país. Pero a nivel personal, inicié mis investigaciones en enfermedades infecciosas porque vivo y trabajo en la selva amazónica, donde la prevalencia de estas enfermedades es muy, muy alta y son problemas graves de salud pública. En cáncer específicamente, tuve la oportunidad de iniciar investigaciones gracias a la doctora Patty Gravit, una experta en cáncer, y la doctora Valerie Paz-Soldán de la Universidad de Tulane, experta en Implementation Science. Trabajamos desde hace algunos años en la prevención de cáncer de cuello uterino, otro gran problema en la región donde vivo. En realidad no me considero experta en el tema de cáncer, pero sí en los procesos de implementación de evidencia científica a las políticas sanitarias, analizando la realidad, contextualizando para entender bien el sistema, facilitando grupos de trabajo y discusión de actores locales para implementar estas intervenciones. Gracias.
Right. No, thank you. And, some of your thoughts are also being reflected in the Mentimeter poll, for example, professional networks, the presence of institutions and partners who have this focus. So Simone, could you reflect on your experience, please, in terms of beginning your research career? Are priorities, for instance, set already by your institution, like Graciela mentioned?
So there are similarities there. For me, there was more of a personal interest. I recognized from early on that one of the challenges we experience at my institution is a lot of research that's done gets shelved in publications. So the translatability is very poor, despite the deep desire on the part of the scientists to take this forward. So I was conscious of that. And so one of the things I did early on was to equip myself on the business side. And so I was able to get an MBA. So when I started my PhD research, I was passionate about drug development. In Jamaica, we have high endemism. So we have like roughly 30% of our plants are only found here. So we sit on a gold mine of natural lead molecules. And so I was very passionate about taking these to the final step. So of the two areas I accomplished in my PhD, anti-cancer and chemoprevention, I was keen on the anti-cancer aspect. Mm-hmm. But what I realized is when I looked at the tools that are made available to us as basic scientists to understand cancers and to also begin the drug development screen process, I recognized the disparity that exists. And so I realized at that point that I was more interested in ensuring that whatever molecules we developed could effectively treat cancers among Black women and Black men. And so that was pretty much the genesis for me. Mm-hmm. I didn't really have much experience in grant writing. And so that has developed over the years. And when you get to the mentor part, I'll bring that in. So there are things that I had to learn on the way. There are things that I also learned from my PhD supervisor, mm-hmm. Professor Repika Delgado, who I thank a lot for this. So that's why I'm here, and it's an evolution. It's a continuous process.
And we will get back to those insights from you about what you learned from your PhD supervisors, in the next couple of topics. So over to you, Lifang and Mamudu. In terms of pursuing a research education, can you describe how you developed a curriculum to educate trainees? And we also would like to reflect a little bit on a funding and cost of an education at the end, because we are seeing that in the chat as well as in Mentimeter. So why don't you talk about how curriculum development takes place and support of trainees take place?
May I start just by saying some like big pictures, how we started, how we thought about. You can give more details. Right, so. Yeah, I think at first we identify, what public health need, and then once we found the public health burden, and then we found the right collaborating institutions, and then we try to reach out to the leaderships So all this preparation we think has to be done, because it will make our training program, even collaboration, much easier. So, and once we do that, of course, we'll need the fund, right? And we have making efforts, not only apply for RH training awards, we are also reaching out to our own Northwestern, internal organizations, our own donors. So this really helped us, because once we are confident that we have a sufficient fund, or we will be funded. So when we come back to the collaborating institutions, we speak with certain level of confidence. And then we discuss, how we are going to develop a really sustainable, robust training program, all the details. So another thing I found is it's always good to have multiple PIs, even our training program, and have someone who's really local, who understand, the culture, the even politics, the really scientific needs. So, and Mega can give you more. Mega is Mali-born scientist trained.
Right. Yeah. So how do we address the needs for research training needs in Mali in terms of curriculum development, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So I have to say that, we really build from the existing infrastructure made for infectious diseases. In Mali, for example, we have a big NIH intramural funding on malaria, TB, HIV. So we use what is already there to, we had to, in terms of cancer, everything we found to be priority. So we had to prioritize the priorities too. So I just mentioned, in addition to, the center, we had to build, and gradually it took us 5 years to get there. And,
right.
Get, everything we need to really push not only the research, but the control of cancer in Mali, because sometimes we tend to forget that we do all of this to, save life, not for publication. And so in terms of curriculum, to get back to the question, in addition to all I mentioned, we also had to create a new master, that will take more into account the cancer, because, cancer tend to be neglected because of infectious diseases, and, we understand why, but as you all mentioned, cancer diseases are become more and more a problem. I was shocked when I really learned how, much mortality, for example, we are getting from cancer disease. I was just checking. I'm currently in Mali. I forgot to mention you that. So I come here regularly. So because we have many PhD
right.
The student. So the master program, which is cancer oriented, but not only the master, because we really provide a combination of, short, medium, and long-term training, taking account the need of every level. Some people need only few days training. Those who have more experience, maybe they just need to, to learn some few aspects for what they do day to day in clinical practice. Sometimes it could be month for young investigators, for example, that come to the US in a mentoring program. And it could go up to long-term training, like a master and PhD program. And the PhDs also, I'm sure we'll get back to that shortly. We always try to have that as a sandwich model, so that we use what is already here locally, but complement that by advanced training in the US at Northwestern, and with other collaborators in the US like Johns Hopkins and other institutions.
So in other words, you're looking at your trainee pool and your needs for research and sort of understanding, who fits into which program, whether you need to train more in Mali, whether there are research experiences needed in Chicago, for instance. And thank you very much for that. Now, I wanted to ask you, Simone, what about cost? There was a There is a lot of notes about what is needed is funding. So can you talk a little bit about your experiences in supporting your research education?
It has been challenging. So a unique challenge for us in Jamaica or in a third world setting is the lack of infrastructure and the lack of local funding, and also at the time the challenge to access overseas funding. So usually you would have to partner with like a PI who existed or held a position in a United States university, before you could apply for those fundings. I'm actually happy to see how things are changing now, where we can actually apply directly as PIs for this. So it has been challenging, but the challenges we're overcoming them day by day, and opportunities like these make it much more easier.
Thank you. Graciela, did you have a similar experience? It seemed like your institutions are setting priorities for research focus. What about research support? Is that available through governments and institutions in your setting?
Bueno, sí, yo podría decir, y casi exactamente, que desde hace 5 años se ha mejorado el acceso a fondos para investigación en mi país. Nosotros tenemos una nueva ley universitaria desde hace 5 o 6 años, y en esta ley universitaria dan el mismo peso a la formación académica y a la investigación dentro de las universidades. Entonces, esto hizo un gran cambio porque el Estado se vio obligado a ofertar mayor cantidad de fondos para las investigaciones. Nosotros teníamos desde hace muchos años un Consejo Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología, el CONCITEC, que ofertaba algunos fondos no muy importantes, pero desde hace 5 años estos fondos ya vienen siendo bastante importantes, y además tenemos los fondos de las propias universidades. No son muchas, pero apoyan en universidades, en temas, en investigaciones pequeñas. Nosotros tenemos 3 formas de conseguir fondos. Los fondos internacionales a través de nuestros mentores o nuestras redes de cooperación. Trabajamos con la Universidad de Tulane, con la Universidad de Johns Hopkins, con la Universidad de Virginia, con muchas universidades en el mundo que andan muy interesados en investigar en mi región. Tenemos nuestros fondos nacionales, los fondos de la universidad y las del CONCITEC. Y bueno, eso es básicamente los fondos a los que nosotros tenemos acceso.
Okay. I guess we will, we have had a lot of discussion about how careers are started, challenges in getting funding, challenges in understanding what are the needs for research training in some settings. I guess what we would like to know more is what can we do to support the pursuit of research, cancer research education? And this is another Mentimeter poll. This is just another way of us to understand better the opportunities and barriers to supporting cancer research education. Is it more funding? Is it protected time? Is it more mentorship? Do we need a viable pathway to a research career? Or do we need more training and targeted programs? So as you can see, clearly there is the need for protected time, and we had one of the participants in the chat note that the challenge for research protected time is something to consider. We're also seeing that there is need for more mentorship. And I think that is a good time to sort of understand that very topic, the need for more mentorship. What are how does pursuing a mentored research career look like? Because from the Mentimeter, we have heard this notion of having a supportive environment and having supportive mentors. So I think what we will do now is to discuss mentorship in global cancer research in a little bit more detail, and then move on to the next topic, and I'll turn it over to Satish to moderate.
Thanks, Sudha, and thanks everyone for participating. I think I'm certainly learning a lot from this conversation. Doug, I don't know if you want to put the next Mentimeter. So, I think in the conversation that we just had during the last session, as well as what was coming in the chat and the Mentimeter, several people raised mentorship as obviously a critically important element to developing a research career really worldwide. So we'd like to explore that a little bit further. So we've moved on to our next Mentimeter question and would love to get your feedback. So the question is, in 1 or 2 words, what are the most important features in a mentor-mentee relationship with respect to global cancer research? And I think as you all are able to enter those in Menti, we'll get kind of a word cloud that will populate as we're speaking and give us something to respond to. So please do respond to that. I want to start maybe though with, even as the Mentimeter responses are coming in, with Drs. Badal and Meza. Dr. Badal, you mentioned the importance of your mentor. Dr. Meza, you talked specifically about Patty Gravitt and Valerie Paz-Saldan, obviously both of whom I think are amazing. I guess I would love to get both of your thoughts about how you went about identifying and beginning your work with a mentor. And maybe later on, I know both of you are playing mentoring roles now for many others. And so it might be nice to kind of explore how you've made that transition. Dr. Meza, maybe we could start with you.
Gracias, sí. Bueno, no sabía, yo en un principio no sabía sobre este tema de la mentoría. Luego descubrí que tenía un mentor. Mi primer mentor fue el doctor Robert Gilman de la Universidad de Johns Hopkins, quien me llevó de la mano hacia la investigación de enfermedades infecciosas. A través de él fue que comencé a recibir mayor capacitación en investigación, pero esto básicamente, como les decía, en enfermedades infecciosas. Él es un mentor de muchas generaciones de investigadores, y más o menos la segunda o tercera generación, allí está la doctora Valerie Paz-Saldan, que también ha sido mentoreada por el doctor Robert Gilman. Conocí a la doctora Valerie Paz-Saldan trabajando también en enfermedades infecciosas, específicamente dengue, pero luego por la importancia que tiene el cáncer de cuello uterino en nuestra región. Nuestra región tiene la más alta tasa de mortalidad en cáncer de cuello uterino en el Perú. Entonces, la doctora Valerie viró su interés en investigación hacia este cáncer en asociación con la doctora Patty Gravitt. Y bueno, como Iquitos era el sitio donde hay mayor prevalencia, decidieron estudiar en Iquitos, y la relación fue bidireccional. Yo las conocía por su investigación anterior en enfermedades infecciosas, y ellas me conocían, y entonces comenzamos a trabajar juntas. Ellas son mucho más expertas, así que yo me he ido alimentando de sus conocimientos, de su experiencia. De verdad que estoy muy, muy contenta de los trabajos que estamos haciendo. Tenemos mucho éxito con nuestro programa de tamizaje en Iquitos, tanto que lo estamos extendiendo a nivel nacional como una experiencia exitosa, y como parte de la difusión de nuestro trabajo, estamos ya produciendo varios papers, varios artículos de investigación que ya estamos publicándolos. Debemos tener alrededor de 7 publicaciones ya en este momento.
Great, thanks so much, Dr. Meza. Dr. Badal, do you want to speak about your experience in trying to identify and a mentor to help support your research career as it was developing?
Thank you, Satish. So I have had several persons influence my development as a researcher. The first person who I approached, this was through when I was doing an undergraduate biochemistry course, and Dr. Raghaber Singh, he came in, he presented the information, and I was intrigued with his delivery, and I was also intrigued by the type of research he was doing. So that was how that relationship began, and I was able to do a master's of philosophy degree with him. Then my PhD mentor, that wasn't something that was intentional. I was just supposed to be working part-time, and it just so happens that my work transitioned into PhD research with her. And from both of these mentors, I've learned a lot about developing research questions, developing the right methodologies to answer these questions, and analyzing and putting those findings together. But the mentor I'd like to really recognize is my current and active mentor, Professor Camille Reagan, who now heads the African Caribbean Cancer Consortium. I actually met Dr. Reagan after I completed my PhD, and I was looking for funding to assist with my development as a PI. And one of the requirements for that funding application was that I was a member of the AC3 consortium. So I had to reach out to her, and the relationship started there. And it has blossomed, in my opinion, into a very fruitful and productive relationship. And it was her who actually introduced me to the Emerging Global Leader Award. And she continues to provide constructive feedback, assistance with helping me to put grant applications together, specifically NIH grants, which we know takes another level of expertise. So she has contributed and remains so to be active in my life. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you both. Maybe it'd be nice to put this question and get mentorship perspectives from Drs. Maiga and Hu as well, who are, kind of maybe able to speak a little bit more to the established mentor and institutional perspective. I just want to acknowledge there's a lot of good stuff coming in through Mentimeter about what our audience today feels are ideal attributes of a mentor-mentee, a successful mentor-mentee relationship. So perhaps Dr. Maiga, we can start with you. I'd be curious, what strategies and or obstacles you faced in trying to create a mentorship environment that can provide the types of things that are coming through on Mentimeter to the mentees participating in your programs.
Yeah, so I think we are really fortunate to be in an environment where we really care about, younger early stage investigator career path. So we always, in all the team we have, asked trainees to have to tell us first what they want to do in the next 5-10 years, to put on paper a career plan, and it has to come from them. We can help them to polish it, but it start there. And then we go to the mentorship. And mentorship is always based on expertise. First, on what the trainee himself or herself want to do. Based on that, we look to somebody in our network who has that expertise. So if somebody want to do breast cancer, not only somebody who's doing breast cancer, we're trying to make sure there is a mutual interest for both the mentee and the mentor to work together on a specific subjects, because it has to start there. We also, as I mentioned, fortunate to have many D4 funding. So at every annual meeting that we have, we provide a mentoring training, because as we have to have all the time a local mentor and a mentor in the US. So we realized that many of the local mentors need some training too. So we have also now a training that we call, mentoring the mentors, because it's usually, a new word for most of them in LMIC. People tend to confuse about supervising and mentoring. So, all the aspects that are being mentioned here are usually covered. And now more and more, we even try to set an agreement between the mentor and the mentee so that, the expectations are set, the goals are known, and there will be a follow-up. So at least we have to have a meeting once a month, at least weekly if possible, but at least it has to be once a month. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Maiga. Lifang, do you want to add to that, Dr. Hu?
Sure. So I think Mega mentioned that challenges some local mentors, right? They also need some additional training. I would have also add that even the mentors, in the US institutions, because many of them don't have the global health experience, or with limited global health experience. So we have to also closely work with the mentors who are in the US institutions. So a very good example is, this is particularly important for our short and the medium-term training programs, because our mentees are still working full-time in their country, in their institutions. In this case, and the expectation from the US institutions mentors would be high, because sometimes it can be even some upset, say why they did not do this. So one of our D43 actually trainee has encountered these problems. We have to reach out to the leadership, really understand what is going on, and then start communication with the program here in the at the Northwestern in Chicago. The communication really helps. So I would say communication is the key in the success of the training programs. This is one thing I would like to add to what Mega just said. And the other thing is to develop a really sustainable long-term mentor-mentee relationship. We have to trust, because we have to trust ourselves, because we picked up our mentees. If we always babysit our mentees and then they feel like they're constrained, maybe beginning they show you high respect, but with time goes on, and then they probably feel like they want to be more independent. So my experience or lessons I've learned is to really think them as an independent, scientist, give them opportunities, let them lead or collaborate independently, instead of telling them at every step. And if there are any opportunities presented to them, and guide them. So I think this kind of mentorship, I have benefited from it. Just really, think them, each of them, as an independent, highly self-motivated scientist, and then they know better than mentors in US what they want to do, because they know why they joined this training program. They have a plan for their own future career and then what they want to do for public health or medicine in their country. So I think having this in our mentors' mind, I think will really help us, help the relationship.
Yeah, thank you both. I mean, I think there's a lot of themes about communication, trust, respect, support. Dr. Maiga, I really appreciated the way you distinguish between supervising and mentoring. I might take that even further. I think there's also a difference in sponsoring individuals. That is, you have to be willing to put people forward for opportunities that might have been yours otherwise, right? And that's I think a piece that often doesn't get done. Dr. Chang in the chat has raised the idea about sort of non-scientific competencies. There is a section later in the discussion where I think we're going to try to touch on that specifically. So perhaps we'll just table that until we get to that dedicated portion. And I may hand back over to you, Sudha, now to transition us to the time where we're going to start talking about establishing an independent career.
Yeah, thanks, Satish. That was really fantastic. I mean, some of the things that are coming up on Mentimeter, in terms of trust, respect, communication, listening, I mean, those kind of very nicely segue to our next topic is, once you've had the education, you've had a mentor, now how do you establish your career? And specifically, we would like to hear about what behaviors and attitudes have helped you stay on the research path. Please, and we'll begin with you, Simone. Please reflect on not only what you did to seek mentorship, but also what are some mentor behaviors. You mentioned that you had mentorship in your K43. So what are things in terms of career mentorship that have helped you?
So as Maiga had said, for my current mentor, what was the important ingredient, I think, from my part was trust. I trusted that she had my best interests at heart. And I saw the evidence of that because she would oftentimes introduce me to different opportunities. If I at any point said to her, this is what I'd like to do, she would, if she didn't have the skill set or the resources, she would go into her links and introduce me to different or other mentors who could assist me. So that was important. Mutual respect, where I completely respect her and I trust her. And as a mentee, whatever I can do also for her initiatives, for the things that are important to her, because their reciprocity is important to these types of relationships. As someone who is developing their independent career at the university, some of the things that I have had to engage, resilience is one, stick-to-itivity is one, because if you don't have those, it's easily to get discouraged given the unique challenges that we face, which also spill over into brain drain. I mean, if you have persons with a certain mindset, a certain type of desire, they can easily get stifled when things take too long to progress, when they don't have an environment that stimulates their inquisition. So I am here trying to do that. I'm here trying to ensure that my legacy, whatever I leave behind for my students, is something that they can build on and leave for their students, and we can eventually have an environment that makes a type of research, cancer research, that we do competitive with other more advanced institutions.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I think those qualities are universally applicable, and I certainly have learned that in over time. What about you, Graciela? What are your thoughts on specific behaviors that help in providing and receiving mentorship?
Bueno, en mi experiencia, creo que uno de los aspectos más importantes es que tengan compromiso, disponibilidad de tiempo para poder analizar, para poder discutir entre nosotros los temas que estamos investigando. Ese es un poco difícil en mi país porque no se respeta mucho el tiempo de investigación. Entonces, por ejemplo, yo trabajo en gestión y trabajo en la universidad, y en la universidad tengo una parte académica y una parte en investigación. Es decir, que solamente tengo aproximadamente el 30% de mi tiempo para la investigación. Entonces, igual con el resto de profesionales que hacen investigación. Entonces, el hecho de darse un tiempo para sentarse y discutir con los que estás haciendo mentoría o los que te están ayudando a desarrollar tu carrera en investigación, para mí es lo más importante, y felizmente eso es lo que yo he encontrado en mis mentores. Gracias.
No, thank you. And, I just wanted to remind the audience that the Mentimeter question is on the screen, where we are asking in 1 or 2 words to please describe the barriers to establishing an independent career in global cancer research. Now, I would probably go back to you, Simone. So now that you're mentoring students, so what are some things that you are specifically trying to do based on your experience? And I'll ask you the same to all the panel members. Go ahead.
I'm still learning that. Well, the same things that I would want or expect from my mentors are things that I would have to ensure I give to my students. So as Graciela pointed out, the time, ensure that you take students on and you can give the time that they need. Ensure that you build relationships of trust so they can trust you to have their best interests at heart, and that you're not just using them to advance your own self. And you have to ensure that whatever infrastructure you're putting in, it's to help them, to stimulate them. And also for me, it's important for me to know what their goals, what their visions are. So whatever I can do in terms of introducing them to different personnel, I do that. So like for my past student, my first student, Henkel, who just graduated, he's now doing postdoctoral work at the Fox Chase Cancer Center. And that introduction was through me, and that introduction was through my mentor. So there's a domino effect that's happening. Right. So I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to navigate different personalities, the needs and the expectations, but I'm hoping to get better at it every day. Thank you.
No, and really, we are seeing on Mentimeter, the word overwhelming is there, overshadowed by mentor. So I think what you have suggested and shared is that this is not easy, and you need a very supportive guide who is seeking, who has your best interests at heart.
Right.
Can I ask you, Li Fang and Mamudu, in terms of both career mentorship and how you're trying to sustain that, in your long-term collaboration as you see different trainees come through. So why don't you go first, then we'll have.
It can be challenging, but also it can be easy. I think, again, it's communication with mentees, really understand what is their best interest, what I mean, their future career development. And so once we understand that, I think we, every step of our training or mentorship will build upon that. I think the trainees are very smart. They understand that. They also appreciate if a mentor really supporting, looking for all possible opportunities to support them and give them, guidance, and then not teaching them how to write a manuscript, also, guide them how to write NIH grant so they can become independent. I think focusing on train them become a future independent scientist, and I think that's why they come to our training program. Right? It really helps. Of course, along the way there are other challenges, cultural issues, typically for those who come to US, and we do everything, to support them. I think one more important thing I would like to point out, sometimes it does not work out. Recognizing, issues at very early stage, and then pinpoint the problems and provide the right solutions is very important. Because many of us, right, we focus on science too much, and then if there are problems, we assume that it will be gone automatically. And so have ears to listen, what are the problems, reach out to their own, leaders, leadership or mentors, senior, understand issues. And I think provide solutions really as a leader to stand up for. Sometimes I do tell mentee, let me be that person to take the bullets. You focus on your science. Give me some time. Let me, figure out what is going on or what we can do to support you. It helps. I think that make us something.
Yeah, so I will add that I also agree with the other panelists that putting the interests of trainees ahead of everything is a good strategy. And I used to tell trainees, it's true, we have milestone, we have timeline, we have goals on a specific funded project, but their career plan is the most important. Right? And that will pay off going forward because we need more expertise. The first resources we'll have is really the people and good trained people. So in terms of time, the best strategy we found, for example, in Mali, is, clinicians usually are the one starting new program, new research, because we do mostly clinical research, but clinician, I think that is a universal problem. So they don't have time because, we don't have that many physicians and they have other responsibility already that, is difficult for them to leave. So what we propose now to hire clinicians directly to our research team so that work for us. So if they work for the government hospital, then, they can't have enough time. But when we hire them, then we decide how much time they have to do, because then their primary goal will be to do their research. They still can have 10%, 15% of clinical time, because that will help them too in their day-to-day research, will help us, enroll patient in the study. So we also try, to all with training. Another aspect is, trying to do the best we could sandwich type training. So instead of trainees coming forward, we had in few occasions sending trainees for, training that is not locally available. But for all PhDs, for example, they have to do their research locally. They will come for 1 year, 2 years, so they gain some expertise. Is also the time for them to learn. They don't, we advise them not to keep doing what they usually do in a PhD program. You have to go out, learn new things, and things that will bring them to an international level, to the international competition. So funding also will help to get them engaged. Sometimes, it's just small funding. We are fortunate to have Catalyzer program at Northwestern, 25. So it's not difficult to get. So we get them to write downs to, and, at least get some resources to feel that they are not working just for us. They have their own project, and they, usually to get them very motivated.
So it sounds like, so from the Mentimeter, there are things like lack of leadership support, and, value of research career receiving opportunities. So it looks like from your experience, there is probably two things that I'm hearing, either there is a one-on-one mentor-mentee relationship where you're looking both at the scientific development as well as the individual professional development. And also what you were saying, my guys, institutionally, you're changing things a little bit so that you're hiring people into a research position so that there is some alleviation of that tension between clinic and research responsibilities. Thank you for those thoughts. Graciela, if I might ask you, you mentioned earlier that this tension between research and research time and the time for clinic. Now, based on what you have experienced, for some young investigators who are focusing on research and who approach you for research, what are some things that you do and consider doing that will help nurture their research interests?
Bueno, en ese momento tengo varios tipos de estudiantes. Tengo los estudiantes de pregrado que están en esta sociedad científica de estudiantes. Bueno, con ellos la mentoría no es 1 a 1 porque ellos son muchos, son cerca de 30 y habemos muy pocos asesores junto con ellos. Entonces, en este grupo lo que nosotros hacemos es tratar de buscar oportunidades de capacitación con otras instituciones, capacitaciones que no les cueste. Nosotros tenemos muchas barreras acá en Iquitos, en Loreto. Una de las barreras principales es el Internet, por ejemplo. No tenemos una buena conexión a Internet. Es muy difícil y peor si el clima es malo. No tenemos acceso a bases de datos. Por ejemplo, nosotros no tenemos acceso a Scopus, a Web of Science, y menos los chicos. Algunos profesores lo tenemos, si es que estamos en el registro nacional de investigadores, podemos tener algún acceso, pero los estudiantes no lo tienen. Otra barrera que es importante para ellos es el inglés, y para todos nosotros, ¿no? Entonces, con ellos trabajamos mucho el tema de que tienen que comenzar a estudiar inglés y damos muchos incentivos para aquellos que están estudiando inglés, haciendo un esfuerzo por sí mismo. El otro nivel de estudiantes que tengo son aquellos que están haciendo su investigación para su tesis. Allí con ellos sí puedo trabajar 1 a 1. Tengo más o menos al año no más de 5, porque si no, no podría darles el tiempo y el compromiso que se necesita para estar con ellos. Pero además también tenemos a los estudiantes de las maestrías y los doctorados que están siempre buscando qué investigar, y es que en la zona donde yo vivo hay muchos temas por investigar. Es una zona muy rica para hacer investigación, y entonces estamos en ese mundo de tratar de dar el tiempo que pueda a todos ellos, y aparte de hacer investigación yo misma, ¿no? En el tiempo que me queda.
Right. No, that's excellent to understand that there is, you're reaching out to other institutions and other peers, understanding the needs and gaps for research advancement. So thank you very much for that, Graciela. I think this goes, segues very nicely into the next topic, where we are going to talk about what are the competencies needed to lead and mentor research teams to foster equitable environments. So I'm going to turn it over to Satish.
Thanks, Sudha. I mean, I must say I'm struck by the universality of the conversation that we're having. I think so many of the issues that have been raised with respect to developing a research career are not, I think, particular to Jamaica or Mali or Iquitos, but are truly things that we are wrestling with even at the NCI, as I alluded to, I think, in my opening remarks. So I think the goal now is to talk a little bit about equity and how we create equitable environments. Doug, I don't know if the first Mentimeter question wants to come up. So again, there's a new question in Mentimeter, which we'd love to get feedback on from the audience. So how do we overcome inequitable global cancer research collaborations? And as you're populating Menti with your answers, we can try to respond to that as we're initiating a conversation. This will also allow us to come back to something that Dr. Chang raised in the chat earlier about, and I think Dr. Hu also mentioned, and having many faculty at Northwestern that they were drawing on in support of their research training programs who perhaps didn't have substantive global health experience, and that creating supportive mentor-mentee relationships in that context was challenging, I think, as we would all expect in some regard. So maybe we can start with Drs. Meza and Badal first. But I wonder if you could comment on, in your careers thus far, what are the non-scientific skills, behaviors. We tend to call these things soft skills, but I actually think that devalues them to some extent, given how essential they are, for success in science and in global cancer research specifically. But what, maybe you could speak a little bit to those skills that you think are needed for success in global cancer research. Dr. Meza, maybe we could start with you.
Bueno, creo que lo principal es saber organizar el tiempo, tener bastante constancia en el trabajo, orden en lo que hacemos. Creo que esa es una de las principales cosas que a mí me ayudan, porque soy muy, muy organizada en las cosas que hago. Todo lo hago con agenda y bueno, creo que es una de las cosas principales, el hecho de respetar los tiempos de entrega de resultados, los tiempos de entrega de trabajos, ¿no? Y para eso también creo que entre las habilidades blandas tiene que estar el hecho de saber trabajar en equipo, ¿no? Mucha colaboración con los compañeros de investigación, empatía, saber que también reconocer los problemas de tiempo que ellos tienen y bueno, ayudarlos también a organizarse. Creo que eso es, ¿no? La organización en el tiempo. Eso es lo que más me ha ayudado. Gracias.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, thank you. I'm just reflecting on my own career. I don't think anyone ever told me how important time management was explicitly. Dr. Badal, I'm curious about your thoughts here.
I completely agree with Garcella, and I'd like to add interpersonal relations are actually important. How do you navigate disagreements? And as I have said before, these are areas that I am still trying to get better at, understanding the different personalities, understanding ways that you can listen and provide avenues for empowering persons, be it persons, colleagues or mentees, and allowing persons the room to grow and flourish the way that you would want to grow and flourish. So these are all the skills that don't come overnight. Some of them take lifetime to develop, to craft, but they're essential because you're going to be working with diverse persons, especially in tackling global cancer on a global level. You have to interact with different personalities through different ethnicities, geographical locales. So how do you navigate communicating effectively and ensuring that you foster an environment of trust between the persons that you're working with? So those are skills that I am learning in my career right now.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm just looking at the Mentimeter, and there's a lot of discussion about kind of South-South collaboration, targeted funding. Doug, at some point soon, I wonder if we could switch to the next question, which is about features necessary for equitable global cancer research collaborations. I think in some ways that relates more directly to the conversation we're having now, but maybe as we're doing that, Lifang, you mentioned actually this earlier about some of the difficulties in essentially training experienced US mentors how to be effective mentors in support of your global cancer research training program. So I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on that, how you did that.
Sure. I think recognize the individual differences, cultural differences is the key. So only if we have that kind of mentality, so we can really, when problem occurs or even during the communication, we can make the mentor-mentee relationship more comfortable, efficient, and more trusted. That's what I have learned from my mentorship experience. So another thing, as you guys all mentioned, the time management, also multiple tasking, because many of the mentees, they are, doing clinical work in their country, and then they also, doing science with us. Sometimes, you can tell if they say, oh, I have been busy, they put everything down, and we have to figure out a way, really gradually train them how to do multiple tasking. And we also have to overcome the time differences, right? And nowadays, because of the COVID-19, we also do a lot of virtual communication, also meetings, how to work in a team, understand, the everyone's busy schedule. I think a lot of things like you just mentioned, all together really collectively decide the the success of the mentorship or training program. So my experience is always, listen, always listen, be open-minded. If mentees are telling something, don't think they don't know. Listen, and then identify the underlying issues to come up solutions, see what we can do. If mentors put the mentees' best interest, I mean career development, as their best interest, I think things can be much easier. Not only think about our deadlines. Deadline serves for the research, right? So sometimes we focus on too much deadlines and numbers. How many publications have you done? Is that what I realized always backfire and focus on their scientific development. That's the ultimate goal of training program.
No, that's great. I mean, in essence, you're arguing for like a people-centered training program rather than a product-centered training program. Dr. Maiga, I'd love to hear your thoughts on, again, you've tried to foster interaction between this community of mentors and mentees in Malawi, in Mali, sorry, that was a slip. Because you have both mentors and mentees in Malawi, and you have both mentors and mentees in Chicago. So what non-technical kind of training aspects have you had to implement in order to get those communities to work effectively together?
Yeah, and as you may expect, there are many challenges. And then on the US side, I think the first big challenge is getting the admin here to understand how things are different in LMIC, because things are pretty easy with, here in US, I mean, with a lot of resources, a lot of training. In most of the cases, admin they have checklists, they send, we need this and that, but that doesn't work. You sending a checklist to somebody who, is not necessarily used to do those kind of things. So we most of the time get ourselves doing that for the local people. And one thing I think for our team that has been very helpful was to have me from Mali as a faculty at Northwestern and being a liaison with the local team. And I understand, their need. I understand, they will tell me things that they will not necessarily tell to somebody else. I can, call them on WhatsApp anytime so we can solve any issues, without, other even knowing about it. So in Nigeria, we had similar pattern too with Musa Jonah, who was trained at Northwestern, is back now in Nigeria, and he's our point of contact. So he understands the work environment in the US, how fast we want things to be, we have deadline, that's not, he's used to be pushed. So that's not necessarily culturally the case in some places. But having somebody like him who experienced it in the US make it very easy for us. And English, and Graciela mentioned it, is a barrier for Francophone countries too, like Mali. So half of the African countries speak French. So, LMICs are underrepresented in many research, but the Francophone countries are even less represented. So that's the big issue. In most of many programs we ended up being the only Francophone country, or, you know, I was looking in many countries, how many NH grants they have, even around Mali, you know, you can count them by your finger. So a lot have to be done, and we always advocate that to even NIH, that, you know, we need to include Francophone countries, like in big network like HIV ACTG network, for example. They are completely out of those important research team. Yeah, so, and I think having an agreement that I mentioned before between mentor and mentee help to make things easier, smoother in terms of time difference, in terms of IT can be an issue. But, you know, if we have a schedule, for example, for a year, and that's something that will come with the agreement, that, you know, the mentor and the mentee has to schedule meeting on a regular basis for an entire year, so that, you know, they will keep it going. So yeah, that's what I have to add.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking at the mentee. Maybe one last question really to all of you before we move on to the next section. You know, there's a lot here about cultural awareness, power balance, humility. You know, I guess I'll just say, so established NCI funded investigators are perhaps not famous for being the most humble people in the world, right? And so, you know, I think it's easy to say we have to communicate more and there needs to be more cultural awareness. And I think you all have found some exceptional individuals to build, you know, to support your careers and or build programs around. But I wonder if you could speak a little bit about how, you know, this is really achieving a change in power dynamics and real equity, I think can be more challenging than that, because I think these habits are quite long-standing for many of us, myself included. I'll put myself in that category as well as so I guess I'm curious how, if there are strategies that any of you all have, you know, is there structured training that you've required established US investigators who have not participated in global health research previously that they must do before they can accept a mentee? Or, you know, how, you know, for Simone and Graciela, how have you navigated these relationships, you know, still at relatively early stages of your careers?
I guess I'll go first. I think for me, having a mentor who has firsthand understanding as to the challenges or the differences in operation assisted me greatly. So for example, when I was, or when we were preparing the Emerging Global Leader Award, we don't have an infrastructure that supports grant submissions. So with that knowledge in mind, my mentor was able to get one of the senior officials at her institution to send someone to Jamaica to assist with putting this application together. And through that, I was able to also connect that person with a personnel at the university to get training for grant, because that in itself is another, it can be time, you know, it's time consuming. So for us to submit grant applications on our own, it makes no sense. You're going to have grants and we don't have that infrastructure. So she understood that. So I was able to navigate communicating with the different program officers better. And I believe that perhaps in the future, maybe grants could be made available or funding could be made available to assist with admin support for us in the LMICs. So because of that connection that I was able to make, because the application was rejected the first time, the second time around, that key person at UE, Dr. Grant, was able to submit my application on her own. So once again, capacity building is taking place through my mentor relationship. So that's, I guess, how I have been able to navigate that.
Any other thoughts
Okay.
there, Dr. Meza?
Sí, en realidad, yo nunca he sentido esa brecha de falta de humildad por parte de mis mentores. Es al contrario. Yo siempre he sentido que mientras más conocimiento tiene la persona, son más humildes. Entonces, nunca he visto esa brecha. Lo que sí pueden haber sentido, por ejemplo, nuestros mentores que no son peruanos, con nosotros los peruanos, es que nosotros tenemos una diferente cultura respecto, por ejemplo, a los plazos de entrega, somos más flexibles, somos un poco impuntuales. Entonces, allí puede haber un poco de choque de culturas, ¿no? Puede haber habido choque de culturas. Lo que sí les puedo decir que es una característica de mi región es que nosotros tenemos aquí muchas comunidades indígenas y puede que haya habido alguna vez desacuerdo con nuestros compañeros de investigación respecto a qué metodología de investigación utilizar o qué lugar estudiar, a qué grupo, cómo acceder a ellos, ¿no? Entonces, allí sí hemos entrado en muchas discusiones porque investigar en comunidades indígenas es bien difícil. Entonces, allí hemos tenido, de repente, en algún momento, algunos desacuerdos, pero es básicamente porque necesitan saber también cuáles son las particularidades y el contexto en cada zona de estudio.
Thanks, Dr. Beza. Sudha, maybe I'll hand over to you to transition. I think that's a really nice transition to the next topic,
absolutely.
Topic where I think we can continue to explore some of these ideas.
Yes. I think it's a nice continuation. Thanks, Satish. So, we'll just go on to the last topic, which is basically kind of putting it all together. So there is trained researchers, there's mentors, but cancer research in global settings is basically a team science. We are bringing together different competencies, different experiences of people, different cultures together. So the question we have on Mentimeter that will sort of frame our discussion is, how can we foster global cancer team science, the pursuit of multidisciplinary research and diverse perspectives coming together to conduct collaborations. So I will ask, Doctors Maiga and Hu, your teams have worked together for a long time now, for over a decade, I think. So I just wanted to ask, how did it start, and how do you maintain these collaborations? What can you share with us about those experiences?
I can start. So my experience with Lifang, and I have to say I'm also a mentee here. So of Lifang, who is also mentoring me. Most of us are mentee and mentors here. I am one. So, and you can see that I have been MPI on VD43. That means you really care about my career, my interests in helping to get things, to get where I really want to be. So we get together through mentoring a young investigator from Mali working on breast cancer. At that time, I was working on HIV and TB. In Mali, I was quoted like the grant guy, because I love to write grant. I wrote 3 grants when I was PhD student, which was unusual. 1 was funded, and 2 when I was postdoctoral. So, and that's very rare in Mali. So if people have grant to submit, even if it's not in my area of expertise, they always try to come to me to, you know, to ask for guidance. Like in Mali, we didn't also have, you know, grant submission team, admin team. So I teach people to even a budget, you know, sometimes I submit their grant through through the Mali, you know, platform. And sometimes they, you know, the university representative give me, you know, the role of university representative, which I'm not really, just to be able to help people to submit their grant. So we get into that young guy who was doing, you know, breast cancer. I was in my area of expertise. Lifan had the expertise. She was helping, but she also couldn't, you know, take care of all those small things of budgeting or things like that. So I was helping that young investigator to submit his K grant. And that's how we get, I also start learning about cancer research, and I get passionate about it. And now I'm totally moved to cancer research.
Right.
So that's how we get together. And then I think the most important thing is also to stay productive, you know, get the funding. You know, funding is not everything, but you will agree with me that funding is key. So thanks to NCI, NIS, and all the funders. So, and I think as far as we have the resources to train people to do the research, this will keep going for, you know, many generations to come.
Thank you for that, for sharing that experience. And you know, like some things that are coming up in Mentimeter is you know, sort of taking time to articulate a common purpose shared by diverse team members. So that's what it sounds like. You know, there are different, you know, there's a breast cancer focus, you have done infectious disease research. So you've sort of appreciated the needs of team members, it sounds like. But Li Fang, please add to what Mamoudou said. You have to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Sorry. So I said Dr. Mega is a great example how we turned the mentor-mentee relationship to become a collaborator, co-mentors, co-program leaders. So when we started, yes, and he came to me about breast cancer, but when we saw the opportunities, we constantly evaluate the public health needs in the country. And then we, in addition to our mentorship on our junior faculty for breast cancer research, and we realized infectious disease agent has been a really, a serious risk factors for many cancers. So we started thinking ahead. When the NCI D43 announcement came out, that's how we decided to switch to infectious disease associated cancers. But what we have learned through our core mentorship, you know, on breast cancer have, you know, really brought us together. And again, I have to say that thinking for understand our mentees' potential, their scientific potential, right? And help them develop their future career, and absolutely will benefit the program even as a mentor. So I think that's what I have really learned. And in terms of the developing a program with all the aspects, training aspects that are required for the success of the program, we constantly, you know, evaluate. For example, our D43 training programs includes many aspects and that are required for, you know, our mentees, different mentees. We also reach out to our Northwestern faculty members. They are busy, how we are going to really motivate them. We also make a lot of efforts, you know, having even parties, you know, assign them good mentees, and everyone is the same when they see their efforts are, you know, coming through and become some products, deliverables.
Right.
And they are motivated, right? And mutual respect. I think same already mentioned, respect, you know, our mentees, and always that we are learning from each other. We are just doing, I'm only good at what I am doing, but you are also, you know, teaching me a lot in many aspects. I think this kind of things. Yeah, Meg and I now really, he become an associate director of the center, and he's doing very well. But you know, this is a good example how mentor-mentee relationship can evolve into collaborators. And mentees, they're supposed to do better than their mentors, right? Yeah, that's what my goal is, at least. Thank you.
Looks like I can't tell. It looks like Sudha may have frozen, so I'll take over. So I guess we have just a few minutes left. You know, I think this idea of team science, of course, is cancer research, especially global cancer research, is transdisciplinary and requires working across different research environments. You know, I think you all have provided some real insights and lessons into how we can achieve that better and do that more productively, in addition to the, I think, wonderful input that we've gotten from Mentimeter and through the chat. We probably should, I think, start to wrap up though. And so I want to just go around and see if, you know, if our panelists have any kind of final closing thoughts about the conversation that we've had. You know, perhaps I'll invite the attendees if they want to put something in the chat that we should try to address in these last remaining minutes, but do want to be respectful of everyone's time. And, you know, I'm grateful for the 2 hours that we've been able to spend sort of discussing this topic. Dr. Meza, maybe we'll start from you. Any kind of closing thoughts about today's conversations, and in particular, things that we should be thinking about at the NCI, because we're really eager to hear how we can continue to support this area, the incredible need for global cancer research training.
Primero, muchas gracias por la invitación. Estoy muy honrada y creo que es muy importante investigar. La generación de nuevos conocimientos es muy importante para el desarrollo de nuestras sociedades. También es muy importante difundir estas investigaciones a través de publicaciones, pero que creo que algo que es mucho más importante es cómo hacer que toda esta nueva generación de conocimientos sea aplicado y incorporado a las políticas sanitarias en nuestros países. Eso es algo que venimos trabajando en Perú desde hace algunos años, y que es el tratar de que todo lo que nosotros generamos como nuevos conocimientos finalmente se vea reflejado en mejores políticas sanitarias para mejorar la salud de nuestros pueblos. Gracias.
Dr. Hu, do you want to add any final advice for us at the NCI, or closing thoughts on the conversation that we've had?
I would like to ask or recommend, you know, to promote communication, interaction, also resources sharing. You know, I feel like all the individual training programs, research program for global oncology has built a lot of, you know, resources, capacity even in different countries. And I feel like if we have a system to make all this join together and we all communicate more and better, more frequently, we have a platform for us to share or, you know, have say something if they have some new ideas, new thoughts, would really help to promote the global oncology program and training program too.
Thank you. Dr. Maiga, any advice for us at NCI, or closing thoughts or impressions from the discussion that we've had?
Yeah, I will add that, you know, training should be based on need and designed to, you know, support the control of cancer diseases. So mentoring is getting better with a lot of training both for mentors and mentees, and is getting more formalized with agreement in place. So the institutional support is not always there, but is really needed and can make a big difference. To NCI, I think we are all happy about the new directions. You know, one argument we use to convince the Malian authority to have a center was to tell them, you know, there are a lot of opportunities, especially from NIS, is that we can see the difference that global health is a big interest to NIS. There is no better time for us than now to do cancer research. And that's very powerful. So thank you for all the effort you are doing. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that. Dr. Badal, I want to come to you and get your closing thoughts, or certainly welcome any advice for us.
Thank you. I'm just reflecting on the climate and how the conversations have changed from the moment I started my research until now. The talks on global cancer research, the funding opportunities that are made available, that are now being available to us. A lot is happening. So I'd like to thank you guys for putting some emphasis on this, and I'd like to encourage you to continue making funding opportunities available to us from the LMICs, making mentoring opportunities available to us. And critical to addressing global cancer research is also being a part of organizations that you can network with different persons, different scientists across the world. Organizations like the African Caribbean Cancer Consortium, CAPTC, that are really making great strides in cancer research and addressing the current disparities that exist for breast and prostate. So I am thrilled to be a part of the conversation today, because I'm actually a part of history being made, seeing things change and not just saying, hey, we need to do this, because what we need to do is happening. So thank you very much. And I'm happy and honored to be here today.
Yeah, well, I mean, thank you all. I truly think there's a virtuous cycle here where I think there actually is tremendous enthusiasm for increasing diversity of thought and background in the cancer research workforce more generally. I think that certainly extends to global health settings. And in some ways, these investments are even more justifiable as we see their fruits, which is, you know, people like you and programs like yours that just inevitably reflect so well on, you know, the kinds of investments the NCI can make to improve people's lives worldwide. So I think, I think we're certainly, as I said, doing a lot of intense thinking in the space about how to coordinate and put these programs together in a way that leverages, you know, so much of what's going on, and look forward to, you know, kind of everyone's advice as we go forward. Sudha, I see that you're back on, so maybe I'll hand it over to you to probably.
You know, thank you, Satish. Thank you. You know, I think Graciela mentioned that there are internet problems in the Amazon, and I'm sorry I suddenly lost power and I had to scramble, but thankfully back on. But really, thank you very much for your time and your insights today. As Satish has mentioned, this is a portfolio that we are committed to growing, and we really appreciate your feedback and your advice. And thank you for sharing your experiences.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.